life is for living, right? And I know it's like a very like privileged thing to say, like, the dollar signs are, but I've seen both ends of it. I've been at some point not doing too well, but my parents always made sure we're going to school, no matter what, right?
Sure.
And seen the other side of it, like where I was like earning pretty well, like at Google, right? For example. But I think for me, like my relationship with money is like, this thing is fleeting. Like fiat currency doesn't actually make any sense right now. Everyone just pretends to look the other way. There's no gold standard. There's no lending floor. So the US dollar is pegged on faith, right?
All the dollar is an agreement.
Yeah, that's what it is. You will trade with us, and the more you trade with us, the more powerful it is, right? So you're stuck trading through it. But because I know that, and anything could go away any other time, why not do something that you really want to do?
Make something permanent.
Exactly.
All right, welcome to the Above the Clouds podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Today we have Rama Afullo from Satlyt.
Correct.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you on. We've had a few discussions before this, and I think our listeners are in for a real treat. And as you know, this is a podcast mostly about commercializing very technical things. In this season, we've been focusing on space.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got you are the great guest for that topic. But for somebody who doesn't know much about satellites or that whole ecosystem, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're building and just a little bit about Satlyt?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Richard. Pleasure to be here. I'm glad we're able to, bring this together, especially at such short notice. So I appreciate it. Yeah. So there's a few things to think about, right? But what we're doing at Satlyt is we are pursuing the operational efficiency of satellites in space. So we often theme it in a number of different ways. Sometimes we think about ourselves as the virtual AI data center in orbit because we make satellites more operationally efficient. So we're a software-first startup focused on software-defined networking, where we install software on folk satellites. We find different managed services that are useful for these satellite operators. So it can be if you want to use AI as a cybersecurity health monitor, right? We do that in orbit. Or if you want to be able to reduce the amount of data that you're sending down to the ground because the cost of sending that data down is actually like hurting your company or hurting your bottom line, we can do that. If you want to reduce latency and sort of increase your throughput, we can do that also. So we follow the full sort of line of where satellite data goes, right? Like, so we follow the satellite data from when it's generated in space, the space data, to being sent down to a ground station, to being sent over to a cloud service provider, right? So that's really I think the simplest way to think about what we do, because satellites really, in their essence, are data collection tools. All right, so you put them up into space, and this is typically we're working in low Earth orbit, which is anything from 100 kilometers to about 2,000 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. And to get our software onto these satellites, we can preload it, which is before the satellites launch into orbit, we put our software onto the satellite, or we can uplink directly onto the satellite in space, which is a little bit more complex. You've got to wait for the right orbital pass, got to be working with the right partners. They have to have the right uplink speeds, otherwise it's going to take way too long. And you've got to have a layer of delay tolerance, which means you should be able to combine your full file size at the end without any packet loss, right? So, anyways, that's maybe getting too technical from the beginning, but yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, and I think that is such an interesting point that you brought up about lower orbit. Is that until you just said that, I didn't think about how big that range is.
Yep.
90 kilometers to 2,000 kilometers. There's a long way.
Yes. Yes.
I think people just don't think about the vastness of space.
Yeah, I mean it's massive, right? So if we think about like surface area, it's 4 pi r squared, right? So like really the only everything is a constant except the radius, right? So as you increase the radius that you're above the surface of the Earth, your surface area significantly increases, right? So you've got a lot, which is why like people ask, well, when we see any of these rocket launches, I've never seen a satellite, right? Even though there's allegedly 20,000 of these things orbiting the surface, orbiting the Earth. I'm like, well, when you see shots from space of the ocean, do you ever see a ship?
Yeah.
You do not, right? Because this is so vast, and space is even significantly more vast, right, than anything on Earth. But it's massive. So you're thinking in 4D, right? And these things are zooming at 17,500 miles an hour, right, in orbit. For some reason, my brain thinks in miles and just the speed of the satellites, and it thinks in kilometers when I think about the altitude. It's something I've been trying to correct, but for some reason, that's just how it is, right? But yeah, you've got a lot to work with, a lot of space in space, but you have to think about the interconnectivity and the interoperability of space in general. So that size is both an advantage and a significant disadvantage, and that's what we're working on.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you told me that when we were interviewed, and it really stuck with me, was that you bought your URL.
Yes.
9 years ago.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, you really had a vision.
Yeah.
Walk me through, what you were thinking about when you bought that URL and what you were trying to build versus what you're building today. Is it how faithful to that original vision is it?
Yeah, sure. So it's worth noting that although I've been dreaming about this for a while, I'm also extremely lucky, right? And I was like the third employee of Tesla in Africa, right? I worked in telecoms there. My dad's a PhD is in microwave and satellite technology, so I was surrounded by this. My mom's a computer scientist. Like my older brother's a software engineer. My younger brother's a stuntman in movies, so that's
he's the coolest one of all you.
By far the coolest of all of us. Right, like he was in The Woman King, and he was in what's the new anime series that everyone loves, One Piece. He's in the One Piece series. Like, yeah, really cool, really cool. He's outshining all of us. But I think I was always surrounded by this. So when I bought the domain, initially I bought the .com, so satellite.com, satellite.space, and satellite. There's another one as well. I can't remember. I bought the .ai like 5 years ago, like 5 or 6 years ago. It was just before AI started getting cool, but I was like, oh, that looks kind of nice. But like the thought process at the time was, before I even started working, before even Tesla, I just finished I did my undergrad in mechanical engineering, then I just finished my postgrad in business. So I said, what do I want to actually focus my time on? I said, I really want to do something in space, in satellites. Like now, in retrospect, I'm like, okay, I was really surrounded by it, but I always ignored it, right? I ignored my dad's conferences where he's going for SATCOM, his IEEE work. So he's an electrical engineer, my dad. I just ignored it all, but it's definitely somewhere in the subconscious. But I knew I wanted to do something in satellites and in space. And I remember like just being very like adamant that that's what I was going to do. And at this time I was living in Africa, right? So I'm from Kenya originally, right? And at this time I was living in South Africa. I was like, I want to do something in space. And I bought the domain. I was like, I tried to start a business right after college. To start a startup. It's meant to be like Tinder for business ideas.
Oh, nice.
I swipe through business ideas, match with people, and becomes like an entrepreneurial network. But I just realized just how annoying the venture capital ecosystem was at that point, like a heavy due diligence, whereas I was like reading things about like someone just had like an app idea and it's like raised 2 million in venture capital, like out in Silicon Valley. I was like, I need to go to that Silicon Valley place, right?
That's where all the action is.
Yeah. So I really like in a weird way, like worked my way through it, lived in Europe, then eventually moved to America like 5 or 6 years ago, 2021, however you count it, right? But things have evolved since then because I got to work in telco at Tesla, and in energy systems and sort of battery cells and get to understand them. Then I got to work as a cloud architect and as like a technical solutions consultant in Google Cloud and do a bunch of things at Google and work in AI as well. And finally, like also at Starlink, right, at SpaceX, where I was a product manager. So I got to see these things from a lot of different perspectives, where by the time I actually worked at SpaceX, I already knew that this wasn't going to last, that I had to, like I was itching. I was probably a terrible employee there because I was like itching to leave, right? So it's just been like an amalgamation of a lot of different things that got me there.
just gathering all those building blocks and then put them together to build what you needed to build for yourself.
Yeah. I like to think of it as like Pokemon cards, or like just picking up Pokemon.
Collect them all.
Ash Ketchum. Exactly.
Well, one of the things that you're also telling me about is that you pitched in orbit compute to both Google and to SpaceX.
Yes.
And they both said no.
Yeah.
And so what is it like to pitch an idea to probably arguably two of the most ambitious companies on the planet?
Yeah.
Get told no and say, I'm going to do it myself.
I mean, at the time, it was probably like sound like stupidity to a lot of people. I can understand it a bit more now, right? Like what they were thinking. It sounded like, well, I mean, if they've said no, then there's probably a reason. They probably thought it through, right? But I think because I think starting at Tesla was good because Tesla is very dysfunctional, right? So I got to see how the sausage is made, right? Because like folks are just, being fired front, left, and center. You say the wrong thing to the wrong person, like you just disappear, right? And I was like, well, I was able to make it through that dysfunction, right? And so for me, like being told no never stopped me there because I was told, hey, some of the things you want to retrofit for these telco base stations will not work. I saw Tesla's first real moves with retrofitting the Tesla Powerwall for the telco network, right? So I wasn't overly phased. I think with Google at the time when I was pitching this, like the AI boom had just started, and that was the central focus. It was code red. It was like we've got to like the stuff that OpenAI was using was Google's own technology that it had open sourced, right? The transformer paper, right? Like one of OpenAI's co-founders, Ilya, he came from Google and he helped write that transformer paper. So they're dealing with something that they felt that Google's been an AI first company from the get-go.
Sure.
So they felt like, a real sense of like, we've got to come to grips with this. We've got to figure out exactly what direction Google's going. So I completely understood it, right? So I never really got to present it to leadership. And when I got to SpaceX, it's like, oh, they'll probably take this seriously. And my thesis was simple. If they're willing to take orbital compute seriously, I'm in, all right?
Yeah.
If they are not, then I don't think anyone is taking this as seriously as they should. Then I will go out and find a way to participate in that. So that's why I left SpaceX pretty quickly. I was like, like this is cool and all, but it felt very much like Tesla. And so I felt I wasn't going to be missing out on anything by leaving. And I felt it in my bones that there was something here, and it's just a matter of time. And if you find your way in there faster than other people can, then you're in a good space. And I had my green card already. I was like, it's time to get to it.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you for doing that because it does take a lot of guts to start your own thing, and especially when you're committed to the idea that you were committed to.
Yep.
And being able to see that opportunity, lock in on it, and then just go for it. I think that is something that I've talked about this before with some friends, and they are like, "Oh, you started your own business. Must be nice. You did this, you did that," and I had that idea too. And I was going to do this. And there's a lot of people who had a lot of great ideas for businesses, and they're still employees. So
yeah,
having the idea and being able to walk away from a company that's good about to IPO and do all these things, it takes a real nerve. So kudos to you.
I mean, life is for living, right? I mean, I know it's like a very like privileged thing to say, like the dollar signs are, but I've seen both ends of it. I've been, we were at some point not doing too well. But my parents always made sure we're going to school, no matter what, right?
Sure.
And seeing the other side of it, like where I was like earning pretty well, like at Google, right? For example. But I think for me, like my relationship with money is like, this thing is fleeting. Like fiat currency doesn't actually make any sense right now. Like everyone just pretends to look the other way. There's no gold standard. There's no lending floor. So the US dollar is pegged on faith. Yeah. Right. So
all the dollar is an agreement.
Yeah, that's what it is. You will trade with us, and the more you trade with us, the more powerful it is, right? So you're stuck trading through it. But because I know that, and anything could go away any other time, why not do something that you really want to do.
Make something permanent.
Exactly.
I love it. Yeah, that's the way to think about things. So any young people out there, we're going to give you life advice your parents probably would be angry about, but
yeah. Don't screen record this, and it wasn't us.
Sometime you were telling me a story about in the last couple of years that you got a bet you weren't sure was going to play out the way you thought. What was it? And what did that teach you?
So are you talking about like the software versus hardware bit? Oh yes. Okay. Yeah. So this is the way I thought about this. I said, well, one way or the other, orbital data centers are going to be a thing, right? This is my thesis 4 or 5 years ago. In fact, my dad had just retired, and I was like, oh, Dad, help me write this white paper. He's like, okay, I guess I've got some free time, right? And he actually helped me write a white paper back then. We never released it. But the idea was like, okay, we're going to build these physical orbital data centers in space, right? And I was doing a master's in space systems engineering part-time at Johns Hopkins, and they were like, they introduced the concept of like NASA's Space Systems Engineering Handbook, and I was looking through that, and we're doing trade studies as a group. And so I decided what a trade study is, for those who might not know, it's just like a in-depth technical comparative analysis of like different paths you might take, different engineering decisions you might make. So I said, I'm going to do a trade study. I'd hired some interns. I was paying them part-time. And this before I even went full-time into this. And one of them, she's still with the company right now. And I said, I'm going to do a trade study on whether it makes sense to do this full physical, vertically integrated orbital data center, or if there's a way to do this with software-defined networking. Right. And so we did the trade study, and the software-defined networking won by a long shot. For anyone who's analyzed and understood orbital data centers, there's really like 5 main pillars, right, that you've got to think through with orbital data centers. Like first is thermals, like how do you radiate out the heat? Because like even if space is cold, like or it's a vacuum, you still generate heat, and the heat, like it's not natural convection, so you've got to find a way to get rid of it. So you've got to have massive radiators. The next thing is power generation, right? Like, okay, you've got to have massive solar arrays in order to be able to generate this power, etc. It's very similar to the International Space Station, which, funny enough, we're doing some work with at the moment. That's part of why I'm out here in Houston. And then you've got to think about maintenance. Like if you've got massive GPUs in this orbital data center in space, and the lifespan of this the orbital data center is essentially a satellite. The lifespan of it is 5 to 10 years. You probably might make it last a little bit longer. But the lifespan of a GPU at this point is 1 to 1.5 years before it becomes like not necessarily relevant, not able to run the latest models, etc. Then you think about launch and launch capacity, right? It's like, well, in order to put this thing into space, SpaceX's Starship needs to come to fruition, which coincidentally, I believe they're meant to have the 13th launch of Starship today.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look into that afterwards.
Check on the news, yeah.
Yeah. And so Starship is several years delayed, right? It's the largest rocket ever created. It's supposed to like drop the cost of launch down to like close to $100 a kilogram. Whereas right now, depending on who you ask, it's anywhere between $1,000 to $7,500 if you're like ride sharing, right? So it's quite expensive. If you're trying to drop this cost of launch down that much, there's got to be some give and take, right? It's got to be fully reusable. It's got to solve a lot of engineering challenges. So I looked at that and I said, well, on the software side, you just have to be able to install your software on a satellite.
Yeah, it weighs nothing. So there's the weight problem.
Exactly. Weighs nothing. You can uplink directly. You can preload. You don't own the asset, so your moat is very different, right? So you don't own the space asset, but there's so much more you can do. And then you get to really play in the AI space in a different way, and you're not reliant on so many of these other players. As long as you are, like, your customer becomes the satellite, your user becomes the satellite, right? And that's how I thought about it. And I was like, my bet is we know the first secret, which is like orbital compute and orbital data centers will be a massive, massive deal. But then the second secret is that if you focus only on the hardware, you're going to be in a very tough position, at least for the next 5 years. If you focus on the software, you might not raise as much capital, but you will make much more of it.
Yeah.
And that's the direction we're going down.
That's right. I think that is so a lot of people thought about, I've always thought about that from a just software terrestrially is like that too, right? I mean, you have to pay for people smart engineers to develop the software and those kinds of things, but it's not like building a product and having to manufacture that product.
Exactly.
And, manage supply chain around that. There's a lot of complications around it. And when you go, I think everything when you go to space, it just gets a few orders of magnitude more complex.
Exactly. I mean, like software in space is not easy because it's intermittent, right? Since these satellites are like, going really fast, 17,500 miles an hour. There's only about 10 minutes like a sort of an orbital window where you can downlink the data, where you can send the data down from a satellite to a specific point on Earth every 90 minutes. And that's even assuming the orbital trajectory doesn't change. So you actually have a situation where the satellites themselves, like they are very difficult to network, right, with each other, right? And there's no standardized communications protocol in space either. The same way folks watching this will be using a combination of different internet protocols, HTTPS, TCP/IP, voice over IP, UDP, right? All of these like sort of congregate in a way to help us be able to standardize the way information is disseminated over the internet. Those standards don't exist in space because space is a very different animal, all right? Yeah. Because you don't have direct lines of connection between each these assets. So you could have like delay tolerance networking and a way to deliver content, so content delivery networking, like in space in a way that is useful for folks. So it's a very different beast. Software is difficult in space, but we find it fun. We've had some success, so we're going forward with it.
Well, if it was easy, everyone would do it.
Exactly. Yeah. So no one come compete. No. We welcome all the folks who want to compete with us to come in and work with us also.
Yeah. No, that is one of the things that you described to me, and I didn't really thought about it. Yeah. And you used your hands to tell the story.
Oh yes.
Of the how fast those satellites are moving. You said the miles per hour here, but why don't you tell people about that?
Yeah, sure. Let me see. My hands move around a lot, so let me see how I can do this. Okay, so let's do it like this, right? So what I want folks to imagine is that, so I'll look at this camera, I think this is the easiest way. So imagine that my fist is the Earth, right? So and imagine my knuckles are, so this knuckles and these knuckles, these are ground stations. So this is where you send data down from space, all right? So there's a ground station, a gateway, etc., user terminal, like whatever, right? And so if my individual fingers on my right hand are satellites, typically what happens is satellites like get launched by a rocket. Right now, folks are saying by a catapult. There's a whole bunch of different ideas. They get launched into space, and we're going to assume that we're talking about low Earth orbit, which, like we mentioned before, is between 100 kilometers and 2,000 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. So it's about 60 miles to about, let's say 600 miles, I think, something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, right above the surface of the Earth. What you're putting these satellites into orbit, and they typically will be moving at about 17,500 miles an hour. It takes them about 90 minutes, right? 1.5 hours to go from point back to that same point in one orbital cycle. Within that time, you have about a 10-minute window. It's normally like actually about 6 minutes. It really does depend. It varies, like 6 to 10 minutes or so. I'll say 10 minutes just for the sake of the conversation, where you have the ability, the right field of view to downlink your data, which means to send the data you've collected from space. So it can be you took images of the Earth from space, you want to send them down. It can be like some telemetry you've picked up with your sensors, etc. It can be any sort of space data, space weather data, right? And you're sending this down to the ground. Now, if there's any cloud cover, electromagnetic or spectrum interference, any number of other things, as you're sending that data down, you can lose a lot of that data. And actually, we found that in a lot of cases, folks, like up to 90% of their data that they're sending down can either be lost, corrupted, or useless to the ground operators and to the satellite operators' customers themselves.
That's 90% seems just a little extreme, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends what you're doing. Like if you're doing Earth observation imagery, which is taking photos of the surface of the Earth, like if you think about it, like at least even at your very best orbital path, because of how vast the oceans are, 60% of the best flight orbital path will still be flying over the ocean. So if you're not selling all of that data to NOAA or to one of these companies that really wants like that data because they collect it for whatever type of reason, and if they're not willing to pay a lot for it, right, you're actually out of luck, right, for a lot of different things. So the best thing is to think about, well, a good chunk of that, even that orbital flight path, like that's actually useless data for most folks, right? So what can we do with that compute time instead with your satellite? And that's how I like to think about the problem set.
Yeah. So that gets us to some really interesting topics around kind of use cases for the problems you're going to solve. Maybe walk the audience through that.
Yeah. So operational efficiency of the satellite is the primary like wedge for us, right? So how do we make sure that the satellite is as efficient as it possibly can be? How do we figure out ways to reduce the cost of sending your data down? Like I mentioned, if you're sending that data down to a ground station, then you actually pay, oftentimes if you're a small to medium-sized satellite operator, you pay this ground station operator anything between like just short of $1 to like $20 per gigabyte that you send down. If you're gathering 2-3 terabytes a day, it starts to add up.
Yeah.
Right. And you're trying to send all of this down and you might not have the right downlink equipment, etc. So you want to get right to the heart of the data, to what is the 5% of my data that's actually useful. Right. So we work across space to space. So we've got something called the satellite control plane working within our satellite network. We go space to ground, where we're looking at federated downlink and compression of data and operational efficiency of that data in general. And pre-processing of it. And then we go ground to cloud service provider because we want to automate the process of sending your data over down to like one of the large hyperscalers, so Google, Amazon, Microsoft, etc. Right? And all of this is bi-directional, right? So we also work, and this is in real time, like right back up to the satellite as well. So we say, well, because we know what type of data you're actually collecting on the ground and what type of data you're selling, we can also work that back towards what type of data is the most useful for you in space for you to be collecting. All right. So we make your satellite so much more operationally efficient. Then beyond that, we've got other managed services. For example, we've run like Google Gemma in orbit, which is a small language model, so a version of Google Gemini. And what we did with it is we used it as, we essentially injected a fault onto a satellite and then used Google Gemma to detect the fault, isolate the fault, and eradicate the fault all in orbit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can do some really cool stuff, right? Most of the stuff like on the ground is not really like, the idea of detecting like that there's a virus on your computer right now.
Sure.
It's really the same thing.
Sure.
It's not that foreign a concept. Like folks have like
technical
antivirus
difficulty people figured out a while back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to do it in space in a repeatable way and to be able to automate it, like that's where the challenge begins, because space doesn't have the standardized comms protocols that we were talking about before.
Yeah, and I think just for my education, I would assume that a satellite doesn't have a tremendous amount of compute power for all those limiting factors you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And so you have to have some very efficient software
Yes.
in order to do that.
Yes. Super efficient. Yes.
And is that why I didn't know about Gemma? That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Is that why you chose Gemma? Just because it's just easier to deploy and?
Yeah, I think there's really a lot of what really got me interested in small language models was when DeepSeek came out like a year ago, because they were letting you run it on the edge. So on the edge and in situ, Like on the edge just means that you are running it at the place where it's most needed, right? Like, so you're running the compute in the place where it's most needed instead of like running it on a data center somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really the opposite of what the cloud service providers really want at the heart of it, because AWS's entire vision was, we don't want you running anything on-prem, right, on-premise. We want you to actually run it on our data centers, right, remotely. And then now a lot of folks are like, well, we actually want to be able to run some process on the edge because it reduces latency, reduces lag. It also ends up being much more powerful because we can use our own processors instead of like relying on your GPU.
Sure.
We know exactly what it's running on, and we don't have to pay for that because we already bought them, right? So it's really a similar concept to that, right? Like where you use a small language model. So when I saw DeepSeek come out last year, I was like, hey, team, how do we get this on our satellite? And then I had to slow down a bit since it is a Chinese application, and think, well, I'm working in the space industry. There are ITAR arms regulations, right? So like there's ways you have to work with certain people from certain countries. Like, and I was like, do I really want to go through all that red tape just so I can get a small language model on here? Not really. But Gemma 3 turned out to be really good. And now we're actually about to deploy Gemma 4 on the International Space Station, about to deploy it on a few other satellites as well, because we just found that it's really useful and really efficient.
Just phoning up your old friends at Google.
Well, why not? Yeah. We're actually meeting with the Gemma, the actual core Gemma team, like next week as well. It should be interesting.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I think we work with a lot of companies across different industries, and the oil and gas industry is one. It's a big one here in Houston, and they use edge compute a lot for the same reasons you said, because they're on frontier locations. They're out far away.
Yes,
you don't get much more remote and more frontier than space, right?
Yeah. I think about that a lot. I'm like, oh man, we could probably make a lot of money if we did something like not in space. But it wouldn't be as fun. But I could probably just, milk something, go build a ChatGPT wrapper and just like run home. I consider it. If this fails, you'll see me there.
They solve the tough problems first. This is something we've talked to folks about at NASA. There's a lot of technical requirements and hurdles you have to do anything in space.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of terrestrial applications for those.
Yes.
Those inventions and all that technology you've developed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But and they have a portal to do that, but it's not the easiest thing to navigate. It's hard to see the value in those things. And I think there's so many applications that if you can solve it for space and you can bring it down to Earth, you can recoup some of your investment and all that time, and to redeploy it here.
Definitely. Although I think oftentimes the benefactors of that are other folks who found different ways to repurpose that technology.
Yeah.
So we want to not be that story, right? Like we want to be the benefactors of what we're building out here. But I will say, you mentioned NASA; they are my favorite. Like, they're probably the only government entity of any kind anywhere in the world that I like.
Me too.
The bar was below zero, sure, right? Yeah. But yeah, like I love NASA, right? Like they're really cool. Like I think they're like, a lot of folks will be out there talking about humanity, but like collecting trillions of dollars. But NASA really lives that, right? Like no matter what, like through the Cold War, they were still collaborating with Russia and China, right? Like just very openly, like, hey, like, we're building this thing, we're building this International Space Station. We're going to collaborate with as many folks that would make the most sense for us, right? Still, like deal with Russia or the Soyuz, right? Regardless of what wars are going on. So that's something I've always liked. And NASA, on top of that, like when I first like walked to NASA Ames, like the chief technologist there, I was like, I met him and I said, hey, I would love to have a chat with you. He said, sure. I came in, it's like 2022, 23. And he just like took out a piece of paper, just wrote down everything I said, as if I was saying the most important stuff ever. I'm sure if I recorded that conversation and realized that I was just talking so much nonsense, but he's like, oh, this makes so much sense. I was talking about orbital data centers at the time. Like, this is great. This makes so much sense. This is awesome. And I was like, oh, I guess, yeah. But he like filled me with all this confidence, right? And he just like met me. And at the time, I was still working at Google. I hadn't gotten my green card yet. I was still going through that that process. And he still took me so seriously, and I appreciated that. And I just find that whenever I'm at NASA, whenever I'm talking to folks from NASA, it's like the same thing. Like they really, they don't disregard someone just because of where they've come from or what their background might be, right? Like they take you very seriously. And I think that's the type of confidence that's instilled in me, right? Like from them, from my parents, from my brothers. Yep.
Yeah, I've noticed that. And I think there's something really, that's one of the things I love about working with technical people, that when technical people are getting together to solve a technical challenge, really is pure. There's not politics doesn't play into it.
Yeah.
I don't think economics even plays into it. I think there
should more, but yeah.
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 But yeah, I think that is generally trying to solve a technical problem.
Yes.
And all, everyone's welcome to join that conversation if you can contribute to it.
Yeah.
That's something I thoroughly admire.
Yeah.
Especially, and NASA takes it to the extreme, I think.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think you have a exciting announcement.
It's more about the name of your show, right? So actually I submitted a couple of trademarks, right? So we actually, our tagline for a year or so was the above cloud service provider, right? So I really love the above the clouds,
Nice.
right? And actually we'll be in Utah as well next month for the Small Sat conference, and I believe their tagline is "Cloud above the clouds" or something like that.
Oh wow!
Right, so it's kind of funny.
Well, tapping into something that other people are tapping into.
It's a great tagline. So we actually just got the trademark for the above cloud service provider. So I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is perfect, because this just came in literally like 2 days ago. And also the trademark for our name, Satlyt. But it's like, that's more of a given, right?
Sure.
That we should probably own that. So that just finally got approved. But I just thought, I was like, oh, that's cool. I should talk to Richard about it.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned some of the use cases and all that. Let's talk about your customers. And you mentioned NASA. I know that's probably your largest customer.
Yep.
Who do you see as your main target base for what you're working on?
So it's an interesting concept, right? I mean, like, we do some work with NASA. It's publicly announced on their website. It's complicated working on NASA because you typically have to work through the grant applications process or something when you're a smaller business. That's where they typically like to route you through. Then you can start doing SpaceX agreements, etc. So we're working through some of that. But really, they help us essentially co-develop our technology through their STTR program. And yes, you can get $1 million plus or so $1 grant directly from them for you to work through this. So the way we look at our customers, so we first segment the customers across sort of 3 main segments. The first is small to medium-sized satellite operators and software vendors, right, who want to operate in space, might be a little bit maybe 1 to 20 satellites within their constellations, and they want to make the satellites as efficient as possible. Sure. So those are the folks we sort of work with right now, and we're live on a couple of satellites at the moment. We've got some software vendor customers, and we're building out from there. Right, we're a 2-year-old company, building out from there. Then we've got the primes and the the hyperscalers. I tend to group them together to be the Lockheeds, Northrops, Google, Amazon, etc. We see within that market, even the Blue Origins and folks like those, we see somewhat grouped in there, right? Because we can price things kind of differently with them. The pricing is rather standard, almost a B2B SaaS with the small to medium-sized satellite operators and the software vendors. And it's more bespoke fashion with the primes, right? Depending on what their use cases are, where we can position things more differently, because we've got different managed services that make sense for them. It's a control plane managed service or orchestrating across their different systems in orbit. And then the final one is the governments and the space agencies. So that's where NASA would fit in. That's where we've signed MOUs with some African governments as well. We're talking to folks all over the place, talking to the European Space Agency, talking to NASA, different NASA wings. That's part of what we're doing here today, right? Talking to the Johnson Space Center folks as well. Side note, if no one's ever done like a tour of the Johnson Space Center, they really, really should. Like if they have the opportunity, it's so cool.
It is
It's
so cool.
right? Have you been to Mission Control?
Yeah,
How cool is that, right? And you see them controlling the ISS. It's amazing.
I've done it many times because when I have family or friends come in from out of town, that's the place. Well, a lot of my friends are nerdy. That's one of the places they want to go, and it's so fun. It's a great experience.
Yeah,
walking around those big rockets where you can really get a sense of how big they are is amazing.
They're massive. I mean, like I think for me, like I really love NASA because of that openness as well, right? Like how they just let folks come in and walk around while they're doing really important stuff. They just trust people, right? Like versus like you can imagine it could have been like this heavily locked down, like but NASA is a civilian. I sound like I'm like doing an ad for NASA. NASA is like a civilian organization, really, right? They're here for the people, and I love that about them.
Yeah, we know when all the government funding happened, cuts and all that stuff with Doge and everything. I'm like you. I don't like government bureaucracy, so I was kind of wasn't very sympathetic until they got to NASA, and I was like, wait, no. Don't cut that. That's actually useful. Come on.
I mean,
the government, the state parks and the national forest, leave that alone. Leave NPR alone. Leave the space there alone. Look at all the other stuff. Get rid of it.
And those didn't really accomplish much, right? Like,
no.
I mean, if anything, they were net negative. Yeah. So let's see how that goes.
Well, let's talk about one of the things you said was that Starlink is like the iPhone.
Yes.
And what you're building is going to be more like
Android.
Like Android.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell me about that concept, because now we kind of know your customers, we know the ecosystem, we know the use cases. Tell us how that applies to this analogy.
Yeah. So I mean, no knock on Apple, but as you can see, like I'm an Android user, right? And for me, like I love the versatility of Android and what it can give you. I mean, both of these are US built ecosystems, right? And ecosystems is the right word, right? So it's a philosophical, like it's all about the ideology of each company, right?
Yeah.
So when Apple built the ecosystem, they said we want to have end-to-end control of everything. Vertically integrated, closed ecosystem, walled garden. We tell you what you can and can't do.
Classic Steve Jobs.
Exactly. Exactly. I often joke with my CTO is like he looks like Steve Wozniak. He's like there, and he's a genius. He's amazing. But then on the other hand, the Android philosophy, right, has always and thankfully, like for the most part, Google is continuing this even after the acquisition of Android. It's been an open source, open ecosystem. Like anyone can build on it. Yeah. What they want to control is like the means of production, like the app store, like how we, how folks actually are able to get onto folks' phones, just so that you're not putting viruses, etc. Right? And I always like that philosophy, right? And there's a similar mentality here, where like Starlink and SpaceX in general, for the most part, they don't actually play that nicely with others, right? Like. Yeah. I was like, is this news? I almost missed the sarcasm there.
Elon is such an easy guy to work with.
So easy.
He's very open to others' ideas.
Yeah. No, he's open to you making sure your idea sounds like it was his idea first. All right. The emperor has no clothes, folks. Right. But for me, I was always like, my philosophy, like I really buy into that. I mean, I was at Google for much longer than I was at, SpaceX and Tesla. And the Google philosophy, like this open, like the fact that they put out the Transformer paper, the fact that they open source Kubernetes, right? Like those are game changers, right? Sure. And so it's the same thing here, like where I want to, like I feel like the best way to get everyone else to play is to actually make it easy for them to interconnect with each other, sure. To make it easy for them to be interoperable, right? Which is really the philosophy of Android, right? Like interoperability across different original equipment manufacturers, right? Like across all the OEMs, right? And that's really our philosophy, right? Like we're creating the standardization of comms protocols in space. We're creating a way for folks to be able to deploy their apps directly onto other satellites in orbit and turn those into managed services. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've talked to some other folks about this, about the satellite ecosystem and mega constellations and all these things.
Yeah.
They're going to need to talk to each other, and they're going to need to work with each other.
Yes.
And they're going to need a platform for that.
Yes. Yeah. If only there was someone building.
Wow. I wonder who is working on solving that problem.
Yeah. I guess we'll never know. Yeah.
Yeah. You heard it here first. So yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting approach to that. And what kind of other players are you gonna foresee joining that ecosystem?
Yeah. Look. Firstly, my philosophy is that if you've got a piece of metal with the chip on it, you put it up into space. Please talk to us, right? But then that's kind of broad. But I mean, the space ecosystem is big, but not so big, right? So we can talk to most folks. But I think that you're going to find that a lot of folks want to be able to deploy their software into orbit for a number of different reasons.
Yeah.
Right. Where like you can do experiments that are very different in space versus down here on Earth, or you might want to be doing some deep space missions that become more and more approachable now. Like now NASA, if you don't have a lunar angle to anything you're doing on NASA, at least a lunar angle, at best also a Mars angle. If you don't have that, they're not interested, because that's really where NASA has moved from really focusing on low Earth orbit to diving deep into deep space. So much so that like even the International Space Station is being deorbited in 2030, and it's going to be a lot of commercial satellite operators that take over that. So I think if folks are interested in deploying their software into space, they should talk to us. But I think beyond that, like anyone who's just interested in the space ecosystem for a number of different reasons, or if they feel like, okay, well, these orbital data centers are actually going to be a real thing, we'll see if they do, right? But if they're actually going to become a real thing, we want to be part of that orchestration layer. We want to be part of that app store. We want to be part of the software-defined networking layer. They should talk to us.
Yeah, that is that's such a interesting world. And when you're talking about if it is a real thing, I think that there is going to be an aspect of it that's pretty big. Now, if it's as big as our friend Elon,
$28 trillion TAM.
If it's that big, and I think the thing about him is his predictions are actually pretty good as far as the thing. Now, his timelines are wildly off.
I don't know. I've been hearing about full self-driving next year for like 11 years or something. But I mean, look, clearly I've worked for a couple of Elon companies. I personally do not see eye to eye with that man for a number of different reasons, right? I think that's the understatement of the century, but I'll keep it PC. I'll keep it PC for now, right? Like I'm not a fan, but I do, like, I have worked at Tesla, I've worked at SpaceX, and they've helped shape a good portion of how I look at, like, doing things rapidly, and like how you can run a team in a way that keeps them motivated, but also like super focused on what the mission is, right? Like, so we've got a very specific mission, and we're building that out as we go, right? But like now I've been able to like fashion like a team with like some of the best folks that I know, right? And I'm super thankful for that, but that's partly because of that regimented training. But yeah, we'll see. Don't know if we'll have a $28 trillion TAM, or I believe the latest quote a couple of days ago was that he was like, this will be worth SpaceX will be worth more than anything else on Earth combined. I said, you need to stop. You're turning space into crypto now, right? Like, these are crypto schemes right now, and like, geez, the rug pull is already deep enough. But let me stop. Like, unless you want me to turn this bit very political. Yeah.
No, I like it. I think that's there's some. That is definitely a bold statement. We'll see how it all pans out.
I will eat my hat.
One of the things you talked about early, and you touched on it briefly, but I really want to dig that deeper, because I think there's a really important thought. Is you say we treat every satellite as a user.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. What's behind that philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, I find it kind of cool, because before the idea of calling customers users, I think is a very social media thing to do, and it really
derogatory.
Like, are they? So you do see them as drug addicts?
Yeah.
See us like scrolling on Instagram, like, yeah, they're using today. It's a bit crazy, right? So I thought, well, actually, you can turn that around. Let's let the machines be users,
Yeah.
right? And the folks who are using the machines are actually the ones in control,
Yeah.
right? So we treat every satellite as a user because it doesn't matter what other satellites are doing. What matters most to that satellite is how can it, in as efficient a manner as possible, send its data.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we can make that easier, the satellite is the one that has our software. The satellite is the user. Right?
Sure.
No one's about to be addicted to our software other than the satellite. Right? And that's how we look at that.
Yeah, that is really interesting point. The other thing you talked about, and I love the business acumen you have behind this of, instead of getting into the hardware game, you went into the software game.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people we've talked about about commercialization of space, just in general, they're still years away from making their first nickel, and you guys are already making money.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that, and why you made that conscious decision to go that route, and the benefits of that.
I mean, I do not romanticize the struggle, right? I'm not in the business of like hoping that I'm in the 99.999% highest percentile, like that small iota of chance where you will become like a bona fide unicorn, not a Y Combinator or a Silicon Valley unicorn, like a real unicorn that's actually worth its weight in salt, right? To be able to do that, you really need to be making that revenue, right? And you need to be doing that at scale. And usually it takes them 5-10 years to get to that scale, right? Where they're actually doing something, where they're profitable and running that at scale. If you do it quicker than that, most of the time you're significantly not profitable, right? Like you're well underwater. That's why you see companies like, oh, hey, got $200 million ARR and we're still fundraising, right? Because it is costing them more money to retain their users than it costs them to actually run their company.
Yeah.
Right. So my conscious decision has been, well, I could probably go and raise a lot of money. And I've got the background for it, or I can tag team the right people, like add some more logos, right, and sound more compelling. But I think for me, part of the thought process has been like, I read this book called The Founder's Dilemmas.
Yeah, it's a great one.
I love it. And I just realized, so my fiance and I were like putting together shelves in my office, and I was like, I don't have a physical copy of that book. That's unacceptable. So I just ordered it. It just arrived yesterday. Because I remember reading that book before I started, and like the idea of the dichotomy between wealth and control, right? Like which path, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive or exhaustive, so whatever. You can have both, but it's probably a good idea to realize where you index, because it helps you with the decision making. And I knew I index for control, right? And I don't index for control as like a control freak per se. I index for control in that I want to control my own destiny.
Yes.
Right. So I knew that I was comfortable with being a solo founder.
Yeah.
All right. A lot of people are not comfortable with that, but I knew what risk I was taking. And I knew that this is a pretty hard bet, and to find the right people right up front before anything is there and before people can draw a salary, it's kind of difficult. But that didn't deter me. Right. So I made conscious decisions about which direction we're going to go in as a company, right? So I knew, well, if we are not going for revenue straight away, we're going to find ourselves in a whole host of issues. I'd studied a lot of space companies in the past and why they died. Yeah. All of them relied on the DoD or DOW, whatever you want to call them now, the Department of War, Defense. And that's still the biggest buyer in space, but they relied heavily on that. As soon as that dries up, or they're no longer the cool kid in town and someone has just copied them, off they go, right? And they haven't found a way to commercialize early. So I just thought, well, part of the advantage I have being in the space industry, but being a software-defined networking layer, is that we can go for the money straight away.
Yeah.
Why should we wait? Who are we waiting for, right? And that's just been my philosophy. Like, let's make ourselves, let's turn ourselves into a company that every investor who ever turned us down will be just kicking themselves. Like I just want to be like, when they shake my hand, like, oh, hey, remember me? I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we can talk. But
Oh, yeah, no, you're the guy who told me no.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, guess what? Now I'm the guy telling you no.
Yeah. I mean, right now we're 2x oversubscribed in our round, and I'm like having to tell some folks no, and it's quite difficult. But yeah, that's been the philosophy.
I like that philosophy a lot, and I'd say it shows a lot of maturity on your side, because we work with a lot of companies that are privately held or work for private or in private equity. And so they're always looking for investment and these kinds of things, or part of their private equity owns them, and they're doing a roll up and adding all these things to the company, and they have a stay, right? If you've got the gold, it's a golden rule. The one with the gold makes the rules. And also even publicly held companies, they are really worried about what the investor story is going to be, more so than they're worried about the customer story sometimes.
Yes.
And to me, it's a tail wagging the dog, because at the end of the day, you have to find a customer and collect money from that customer, or you don't have a business. Yeah. And let's don't say, I don't think that there's enough money you can throw at any business in the front end. If you can't answer that fundamental problem, then you don't have a business. It's a science project. It's a scam, Ponzi scheme. You talk about Y Combinator, right? I mean, you've seen it. You saw Silicon Valley was eaten up with all that crazy, these wild evaluations, and you go, what? How do they calculate that that's going to be worth that much money? I just could never.
It's a thumbs up, finger in the wind. Okay. Like I do like some of the YC folks, but like they're now funding 1,000 startups a year. So there's going to be a lot of folks who know exactly the right things to say to get in there. And of course, Sam Altman was president of Y Combinator once upon a time. We've got a lot of folks who are really good at fundraising.
Yeah.
And don't worry about the mechanics of the business.
Yeah.
And that a lot of VCs have seen that a lot of startups have done that and then eventually figured it out.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's like Airbnb, Amazon, Uber, etc. Although Uber was going straight to the money, they had to subsidize a lot at the beginning. That's why Uber used to be so cheap, right? And then now it's not, right? Because they had to get that stickiness. Yeah. So a lot of folks have seen that in Silicon Valley and be like, oh, that's a repeatable model. But I feel like I read, like, people normally be surprised here because I'm a bit of a cynic. If you read a lot of like some of the stuff like Ed Zitron says, right? Like, I'm very skeptical. And like one of the theories is that Silicon Valley is actually not, like, I live in Silicon Valley. I'm like, it's not as creative as you'd think, because after someone creates something, folks copy that thing.
Yeah, here comes everybody.
Exactly. And that's a problem, right? But whereas the idea is like, how can we make you as innovative and creative as possible?
Yeah, well, kudos to you for, thinking that way right out of the box, because I think that is, that's the right way to think about it. And you control your own domain.
Yep.
That's, somebody told me, I was thinking about getting some funding at the beginning. They're like, get ready to give away a pound of flesh. Oh, that doesn't sound fun. So when someone says no to you, you're talking to a lot of smart people out there. And, when you're trying to find a customer, or when you're trying to, maybe even an investor, someone says, no, I don't get it. Like, what's their objection?
It's a good question. I mean, it can be any number of reasons, or it can be maybe I didn't explain it in the way that they wanted me to. I didn't reach them where they are. That's usually is it, right? Like, you got to find people where they are in general.
Yeah.
Right. So like if you're talking to an investor who's not a technical investor, and you are, I'm like, delay tolerance networking, content delivery networks, and what this does is federate downlink, and they'll be like, oh yeah, and like they never want to appear like not smart.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll go home and feed it through ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and try to understand it. But for the most part, they're dealing with so many startups like on a near daily basis, and so many are coming across their desk that as soon as they don't understand or they can't see the vision, they'll probably say no.
Yeah.
Or as soon as it's not within their thesis, right? So like now you've wasted your time, you wasted their time because like, they weren't sure what you do. So they were willing to take the meeting because they like looked you up and like, oh, wow, he has a good background. Therefore, let me take the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they take the meeting and it's like, a waste of their time because like they don't do space or they feel like it might not make sense because they focus on consumer only or whatever it is, right? And they thought this was just a B2B SaaS, right?
Yeah.
So that can be one of the reasons. I think with customers, for the most part, it might be that they might not think that they're technically in the right place to be able to start servicing this. They might not have the capital themselves, right? That happens a lot as well. Although we're willing to do some free missions here and there, just because we see some promise in the customer and we'll recoup that investment eventually, because the way our software works, just really a flywheel, right? We can plug it back into. But there's often like lots of different things, different reasons. But I think that's true for basically any business, any customer, anyone trying to convince anyone of anything. It's just going to be the Pareto principle, really, right? And 80-20, right, for the most part. And that 20 is probably just going to be people who are maybe. And then from that 20, now you've got to think about, this 20% is saying maybe, but maybe it's only 5% of this. They're a hard yes, right? And you've got to find those people and treat everyone as if they're that small segment, right, that are going to be a hard yes. And if you treat everyone like that, sometimes you find that a lot of people who said no come back. We've got a lot of investors who are like, oh, hey, yeah, I always thought you guys were onto something, who are now trying to like join the right? So that's been interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thinking about that success,
Yeah.
and all that, think about 5 years from today. Say your thesis works out, just like you planned. What's the world look like? What does the business look like 5 years from now?
Oh, well, you'll have another African now running around in space. Yeah, they're shouting his mouth off. But I think beyond that, the way it looks to me is like I said, I love the NASA mission, right? Like for the benefit of humanity, for all humankind, right? I love that, like, and not in the sort of like what is the word that they're using these days? I forgot. The abundance way, like, folks think about it these days, where I feel like it's kind of derivative. It's kind of derogatory to think about that when we could solve poverty right now and we don't, right? It's very, very strange. The human psyche, the human psychology in general, the human condition. But I think in 5 years, we have an interoperable space infrastructure where anyone can plug in. You can get access to space at will in a matter of seconds from all over the world, from emerging markets up to the most affluent areas, where it is not just in the control of a few folks, right? Where can do that, where we are a successful business and more multinational, although we already are that, but multinational in a successful way, right?
Yeah.
And we're hiring folks from all over the world, gotten rid of some of the regulations that actually bog space down, and still have a leadership team at Satlyt that is having fun, solving problems that people care about, building things that people want, and doing it in a way that is fresh and innovative.
Well, that's a beautiful thought, and I wish you all the best. And I hope that I hope that plays out just like you said, for the benefit of all humankind.
Yeah,
and
above the clouds.
And above the clouds. I will be watching and rooting for you guys.
Yes.
So thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, sharing, or spreading the news about us on your favorite channel. Thank you for tuning into Above the Clouds, Stories from the Boardroom. Until next time, stay above the clouds.